The dust from the long gravel driveway tasted of home. It was a taste of my childhood, of summer afternoons spent chasing lizards, and a grandfather whose hands were as tough and worn as the leather of his saddle. Returning to the Riley Ranch wasn't a retreat. It was a pilgrimage. My grandfather, John Riley Sr., had passed a month ago at the ripe old age of 97, leaving me, his only grandson, the 150-year-old expanse of rolling hills, ancient oaks, and memories that he had been the steadfast steward of for his entire life. In my other life, I am Governor John Riley Jr., a man who lives in a world of motorcades, press conferences, and the crushing, relentless weight of public service. For the next 30 days, however, I had taken a quiet, unannounced leave of absence. My official schedule was cleared, my duties delegated to the Lieutenant Governor. I wasn't here as the governor. I was here as Jack, a grandson mourning his hero, a man seeking refuge not from his responsibilities, but from the crushing formality that came with them. I wanted to feel the sun on my own terms, to smell the earth without a phalanx of security, to simply be. The ranch was exactly as I remembered it, a place wonderfully immune to the relentless march of time. The white farmhouse, with its wraparound porch and slightly sagging screen door, stood proudly. The massive red barn, its paint faded and peeling to reveal the rich, dark wood beneath, leaned just a fraction of a degree to the east, as it had for the last 50 years. This place was real. It was authentic. It was everything my life at the state capitol was not. My only concession to my other life was Mark, the head of my state police protection detail, a tall, quiet man, with the watchful eyes of a hawk. He had reluctantly agreed to my terms he could stay on the property, but he had to trade his suit and earpiece for jeans and a flannel shirt. To anyone who asked, he was a ranch hand I'd hired to help me get the place in order. He hated it, but he was loyal. "It's good to see you smile, sir," Mark said from the passenger seat of my old pickup truck as we pulled to a stop in front of the farmhouse. A real smile. I mean, "It's the air, Mark," I said, taking a deep breath. "It's different here. Cleaner." We had just started unloading a few boxes from the truck bed when a pristine, white golf cart hummed up my driveway. It came from the direction of the new, sprawling development of beige stucco McMansions that had sprung up over the last decade, a development that bordered the eastern edge of my property. The woman driving it had an aura of unshakable self-importance. Her silver blonde hair was perfectly coiffed, her tennis whites were immaculate, and her face was set in a mask of pleasant, yet firm, authority. She brought the cart to a halt and surveyed the scene, the old farmhouse, the dusty truck, me in my worn jeans with a look of faint distaste. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice crisp and carrying. "I am Cynthia Davenport, president of the Oak Creek Estates Homeowners Association. I don't believe we've been introduced." "Jack Riley," I said, extending a hand. She gave it a brief, limp shake. "My grandfather was John Riley. I've just inherited the property." "Yes, we were so sorry to hear of John's passing," she said, though her tone conveyed all the sincerity of an automated telephone message. "He was a fixture. In any case, I'm here to welcome you and to get you started on the right foot with the community covenants." I felt a slow, weary confusion. "I appreciate the welcome, Ms. Davenport, but the Riley Ranch isn't a part of your development." She produced a small, patronizing laugh. "Oh, that's a common misconception. While your grandfather's property was originally exempt, his passing triggers a review. As the new owner, This parcel now falls under the purview of the Oak Creek Estates HOA to ensure a consistent and harmonious aesthetic for the entire community. Every word she spoke was a legal and factual absurdity, but she said it with such unshakable confidence that a less informed person might have believed her. She then pointed a perfectly manicured finger toward the magnificent old barn. "We'll need to start there," she said. "The structure is in clear violation of Article 6, Section 2, Exterior Paint and Finish. The approved color palette for all outbuildings is Harvest Taupe or Woodland Beige. That faded red and peeling texture will have to be rectified immediately. I've taken the liberty of preparing your first official notice." She handed me a thick, cream-colored envelope. I took it, my mind reeling from the sheer audacity of her claim. She was standing on land my family had worked for a century and a half, telling me that my grandfather's barn was the wrong shade of beige. "Ms. Davenport," I began, trying to keep my voice even. "I think there has been a serious misunderstanding regarding property lines and legal jurisdictions." "There's no misunderstanding at all," she cut me off, her smile tightening. "Just a new chapter. We find it's always best to be proactive. You have 30 days to submit a remediation plan for the barn. I'll be in touch about the fence line and the unapproved agricultural vehicles next week." Without another word, she climbed back into her golf cart and hummed away, leaving me standing in the dust, holding a ridiculous violation notice. Mark walked over, his face a thundercloud. "Sir," he said, his voice a low growl. "You want me to make a call? I can have the Attorney General's office straighten this out in 5 minutes." "No, Mark," I sighed, looking at the envelope in my hand. "Not yet. For the next 30 days. I'm not the governor. I'm just Jack Riley, the new guy next door." I looked from the notice to the old barn, a structure that had weathered blizzards and droughts, a silent witness to my family's entire history. And it looks like the new guy has a neighbor problem. The first official fine arrived in the mail a week after Cynthia Davenport's initial visit. The cream-colored envelope felt heavier than it should, weighted with the self-importance of its sender. Inside, a professionally printed letter detailed my failure to submit a remediation plan for the barn's non-compliant paint. A fine of $100 was levied, with a stern warning that it would double for every subsequent week of non-compliance. The letter was signed in a flourish of arrogant ink, Cynthia Davenport, President, Oak Creek Estates HOA. My first reaction was that of a weary man seeking peace. A part of me wanted to just write the check, to pay the $100 and make her go away. It would be the easiest path, the path of least resistance. But then, the other part of me, the part that had spent 2 decades navigating the labyrinthine world of legislation and governance, took over. I couldn't simply yield to a baseless assertion of authority. It went against every fiber of my being. An unenforced border, I knew, would soon cease to be a border at all. Instead of writing a check, I spent the afternoon in my grandfather's old study. The room smelled of leather-bound books and Old Spice. From a heavy, cast-iron safe tucked behind a loose bookshelf, I retrieved a long, cylindrical tube of worn leather. Inside were the original deeds to the Riley Ranch, written in the elegant, looping cursive of the 19th century. There were also the more modern documents, the plat maps from the county registrar, the property tax records, and, most importantly, the founding charter and covenant agreements for the Oak Creek Estates development, which my grandfather had wisely obtained and archived when the first bulldozers broke ground. I unrolled the massive, blueprint-sized plat map across my grandfather's oak desk. The boundary line was clear, stark, and unambiguous. The Riley Ranch was a distinct, sovereign entity. The Oak Creek Estates was a recent addition, its property lines ending abruptly at the historic split-rail fence that had marked my family's land for generations. Her claim that my grandfather's passing somehow triggered an annexation of my property into her HOA's jurisdiction was not just a misinterpretation. It was a legal fantasy, a complete fabrication. My next step was to call my chief of staff, Anna Rodriguez, a woman whose competence was matched only by her fierce loyalty. "Jack," she answered, her voice all business. "I thought you were supposed to be off the grid. Don't tell me you're already bored of the country life." "Far from it, Anna," I said, a hint of amusement in my voice. "I have a small personal matter I need some quiet assistance with. Can you have someone on the legal team do a deep dive on HOA Foundation charters? Specifically, I'm interested in clauses related to pre-existing, non-incorporated agricultural parcels. I need to know every precedent in this state regarding jurisdictional overreach." "Is this about that new development bordering the ranch?" she asked, her political antenna already twitching. "Let's just say I'm dealing with a territorial dispute," I replied, "and I want to be armed with more than just a strong fence. Keep it off the official channels. This is just Jack Riley, private citizen, asking for a favor." An hour later, a detailed legal analysis arrived in my secure personal email. It confirmed what I already knew and provided the specific state statutes that backed it up. Armed with this, I drafted a letter to Ms. Cynthia Davenport. It was polite, firm, and legally precise. I stated, simply, that the Riley Ranch was not, and had never been, a party to the Oak Creek Estates HOA. I cited the official county plat map by its registration number and respectfully informed her that any further fines or violation notices would be disregarded as legally invalid. I sent it via certified mail, creating a paper trail. Her response, a week later, was breathtaking in its arrogance. She sent another letter, this one containing a new fine, this time for the 80-year-old split-rail fence itself, which was apparently not on the approved list of fence designs. In the letter, she dismissed my claims, stating that my grandfather had made a verbal agreement with the original developers to incorporate his land into the HOA upon his passing. It was a bald-faced lie, a desperate attempt to create a legal pretext where none existed. She was no longer just an overzealous HOA president. She was actively committing fraud. I looked at the new fine, at the preposterous claim of a verbal agreement, and I felt a shift inside me. This was no longer a simple neighbor dispute. This was a challenge. Cynthia Davenport was not interested in facts or laws. She was interested in power, and she was willing to lie and fabricate to get it. I logged the new letter and the fraudulent claim in my growing file on the matter. I did not send another letter. I did not send a check. I decided to wait. In politics, I had learned that when your opponent is enthusiastically digging their own grave, you don't interrupt them. You simply let them keep digging. The quiet war of letters and fraudulent fines soon escalated into a physical incursion. My grandfather had always marked the entrance to our land with a beautiful, hand-carved wooden sign. It was a single, massive piece of oak with Riley Ranch, St. 1875, carved into it in deep, elegant letters. It was a landmark, a symbol of my family's long history on this land. One morning, as I drove out to get supplies, I found it desecrated. The proud, carved letters had been packed tight with thick, red mud, obscuring our name. Worse, across the main post, someone had used a can of cheap, black spray paint to scrawl a crude message, "Fix up or tear down." I stopped the truck and got out. my hands clenching into fists. This was different from the letters. This was a direct, physical act of disrespect. It was an attack not just on my property, but on my family's legacy. The anger that flashed through me was hot and immediate. Mark, who was with me, saw my face, and his own expression hardened into one of cold fury. As the head of my state police protection detail, an attack on me or my property was a direct affront to his entire professional existence. "Governor," he said, his voice low and tight, his hand instinctively moving to where his service weapon would normally be. "This is a criminal act. Vandalism, trespassing. I can have a state forensics team out here in an hour. We can pull prints, analyze the paint, check for shoe impressions. We'll find who did this." I held up a hand, taking a long, slow breath to cool the fire in my chest. "No, Mark," I said, my voice quieter than he expected. "We're not doing that." "Sir," he asked, his confusion evident. "They can't be allowed to get away with this." "They won't," I assured him. "But we handle this quietly. We follow the protocol. Think of this as a low-level probe, an attempt to gauge our response. If I call in the state police over a little spray paint, I escalate this from a local dispute into a state incident. I'd be using the power of my office to solve a personal problem. That's a political minefield. And it's not how we operate." I looked at the vandalized sign, my mind shifting from anger to strategy. "We're in the intelligence gathering phase, Mark. An overt response will just make them go to ground. We need a covert one. I want surveillance. The best you can get. Discreet, solar-powered, night vision, the works. I want eyes on every approach to this property line. I don't just want to know if they come back. I want to know how they come back, when they come back. And I want a high-definition video of their faces when they do." Mark nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. He understood. This wasn't weakness. It was tradecraft. "I know just the system," he said. "The same one we use for advanced reconnaissance on your field trips. It'll be invisible. I'll get it installed tonight." That evening, under the cover of darkness, Mark and I, dressed in dark clothes, moved like ghosts along my property line. We installed a series of tiny, powerful cameras, concealing them in tree knots, fence posts, and fake rocks. The encrypted feed was routed wirelessly to a secure tablet I kept in the study. As I cleaned the mud from the carved letters of the sign the next day, scrubbing away the insult, I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt a cold, patient resolve. Cynthia Davenport, through her proxies, had escalated from bureaucratic harassment to criminal vandalism. She thought she was sending a message that I was not welcome. She had no idea that her message had been received, logged, and was now under 24/7 surveillance. She thought she was a wolf, circling a stray sheep. She didn't realize she was a specimen in a jar, and I was the scientist, quietly, patiently, observing her every move. Having failed to intimidate me with fines or vandalism, Cynthia shifted her assault to the court of public opinion. She couldn't attack me for breaking rules I was legally exempt from. So she chose a more insidious route. She attacked my character and my family's legacy. Her weapon was the Oak Creek Estates online forum, a private echo chamber where her word was law. Her campaign was a masterclass in slander, wrapped in the guise of concerned neighborliness. She began by posting photos she had taken from her property line, carefully framed to make the ranch look as dilapidated as possible. A picture of the 100-year-old barn was captioned. "Such a shame to see our beautiful landscape blighted by this kind of decay. It affects all of our property values when neighbors don't maintain their structures." A shot of the native wildflower meadow my grandfather had cultivated for 50 years was described as a shocking example of an overgrown and unmanaged fire hazard right on our border. She was building a narrative, painting me as a negligent slumlord, a mysterious and hostile outsider who was single-handedly dragging down her pristine suburban paradise. Her loyal followers on the forum eagerly joined the chorus. "You're so right, Cynthia. It's an eyesore. Someone should force him to clean that place up. I heard he's letting the whole place go to ruin. It's a disgrace to his grandfather's memory." That last comment, I knew, was planted by her. It was a perfectly crafted, personal barb designed to wound. The slander soon escalated from implication to outright fabrication. She began posting about suspicious activity on the ranch. "Has anyone else noticed the strange vehicles coming and going from the old Riley place at all hours?" she wrote one evening. The suspicious vehicle was my unmarked state-owned sedan, driven by Mark or another member of my plainclothes detail when they needed to rotate shifts. And the strange noises at night. It's unsettling. The strange noises were coyotes, a sound as old as the hills themselves. This escalation prompted another call from my chief of staff, Anna. She was a savvy political operator who monitored everything, and the Oak Creek Estates Forum had popped up on her radar. "Jack, this is getting out of hand," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "This Cynthia Davenport woman is committing libel. This isn't just a neighbor dispute anymore. She's creating a public narrative about you. It could become a political liability. One call from my office to a web host, and that entire forum would be shut down for a terms of service violation." "No, Anna," I said calmly, looking out the window at the ranch, a peaceful scene completely at odds with the digital war being waged against it. "Don't touch it. Let her talk. Let her lie." "Let her?" Anna asked, incredulous. "Jack, she's calling you a slumlord and implying you're hosting some kind of criminal enterprise. And she's doing it in writing, on a permanent, time-stamped record," I replied, my voice cool and strategic. "Anna, you know as well as I do. You never interrupt an opponent while they're making a mistake. The moment I use the power of the governor's office to shut down her little website, I become the bully. I lose the moral high ground. This needs to be handled as a private citizen. My private citizen." I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she understood my strategy. "You're building a case," she said, a note of admiration in her voice. "I am," I confirmed. "So don't interfere. Just keep a full, archived copy of every single post she makes. Every comment. Every picture. I want a complete, verifiable record of her entire slander campaign. We're not building a press release. Anna, we're building an indictment." I hung up the phone. I was playing the long game. Cynthia thought she was skillfully isolating and shaming a stubborn neighbor into submission. She was so caught up in her own little world, so enamored with her own perceived power, that she couldn't see the larger reality. Every lie she typed, every false accusation she posted, was another brick in the wall of her own prison. She thought she was weaving a narrative. She had no idea she was actually weaving a noose. When her campaign of public shaming failed to produce a result, Cynthia escalated to the next level. In the classic bully's playbook, she weaponized the authorities. It was a reckless, dangerous move. But for a woman like her, who saw government agencies as mere tools to be wielded by the influential, it was the logical next step. The first official visit was from the county health department. 2 inspectors, a man and a woman, showed up at my door one morning, their faces a mixture of professional duty and clear discomfort. "Mr. Riley." "Sir," the senior inspector began, his voice hesitant. It was then that I realized he had recognized me. My face had been on the news and on billboards across the state for years. My attempt at being just Jack Riley was clearly not as successful as I'd hoped, at least with government employees. "Just Jack is fine," I said with a disarming smile, deciding to play along with the charade. "What can I do for you folks?" "Well, sir," he said, shifting his weight awkwardly. "We received an anonymous complaint, a very detailed one. It alleges that your well water here on the ranch is contaminated with agricultural runoff and is potentially leaching into the water table of the Oak Creek estates." The accusation was serious, designed to cause panic and portray me as a threat to the health and safety of the entire community. It was also, as I knew from the quarterly water quality reports my grandfather had religiously commissioned, a complete fabrication. "I see," I said, my expression unchanging. "Well, you have a job to do. Please, take all the samples you need. The wellhead is just behind the house. I'll show you." I led them to the well, and for the next hour, they conducted their tests. They were overly polite, apologizing for the intrusion at every turn. It was clear they knew the complaint was likely nonsense, but were bound by procedure to investigate it. As they were packing up, the senior inspector turned to me. "For what it's worth, sir," he said in a low voice, "the preliminary field tests show your water is as clean as it gets, probably the cleanest in the whole county. We'll send the official lab report, but this complaint is baseless." "I appreciate you doing your job," I said, shaking his hand. I knew this was Cynthia's work, and now I had another official report to add to my file. A week later, she went for the kill. She made a call not to the county, but to the federal government. She filed an anonymous complaint with the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, alleging that I was illegally dumping massive quantities of banned pesticides and industrial chemicals near the creek that fed into the public water system. This was a different level of warfare. An EPA investigation was no small matter. It could freeze my assets, lead to years of legal battles, and create a public relations nightmare, not just for me, but for my administration. This was a direct, dangerous, and potentially politically catastrophic attack. It forced my hand. I could no longer remain just Jack Riley. I went into my study and made a call to a number I rarely used. "Director Johnson's office," a crisp voice answered. "This is Governor Riley for the director," I said. A moment later, the head of the regional EPA was on the line. "Governor, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "Mark," I said, dispensing with the formalities. "I'm calling on a sensitive personal matter, an anonymous and, I assure you, completely fabricated complaint has been filed regarding my family's private property, the Riley Ranch. I expect and demand that your agency follow all standard procedures to the letter. Investigate this claim thoroughly." "Of course, Governor," he said, a note of confusion in his voice. "However," I continued, my voice firm, "I also need your personal assurance that your field agents will be the very definition of discreet. No press, no public announcements. This is an attempt to use your agency to create a political scandal, and I will not allow it. Your agents are to conduct their investigation, file their report, and that will be the end of it. Am I clear?" "Crystal clear, Governor," Director Johnson said, the gravity of the situation now obvious to him. "You have my word." The EPA agents arrived 2 days later. They were quiet, professional, and almost invisible. They took soil samples, water samples, and left without a word to anyone. A week later, a sealed report arrived at my office in the capital, confirming that the ranch was pristine and that the complaint was materially and factually baseless. I added the report to the file. Cynthia had played her most powerful card. She had tried to bring the full weight of the county and federal governments down on my head. But she had made a fatal miscalculation. She assumed she was attacking a private citizen. She had no idea she was actually attacking the very man who appointed the people who ran those agencies. Her weapons were turning against her, and each failed attack was just another piece of ammunition for my final, decisive counterattack. The final escalation, the one that moved our conflict from a series of calculated attacks to a direct, high-stakes confrontation, was born of Cynthia's unbridled ambition. The State Department of Transportation had been planning a new highway interchange for years, designed to alleviate traffic on the main interstate. Two potential routes were on the table. Route A would cut through a small, undeveloped part of her community's land. Route B, her preferred option, would instead require the state to acquire a significant portion of the western edge of the Riley Ranch through eminent domain. Cynthia, through her political contacts on the county board, learned that the final decision on the route was pending a review and a final signature from one office, the governor's. She saw her chance, not just to save her development from being carved up, but to finally, decisively, break me. She believed she had found the ultimate leverage. She confronted me at the fence line that separated our properties. It was a cool evening, the sun setting behind the hills, casting long shadows. I was repairing a loose section of the historic split-rail fence. She marched across her perfect, manicured lawn, holding a rolled-up set of blueprints. "Riley," she said, her voice filled with a triumphant, predatory glee. "I think it's time we had a real conversation." "I'm listening." "Cynthia," I said, putting down my hammer. Mark, who had been nearby, subtly moved closer, his posture alert. She unrolled the blueprints on the top rail of the fence. It was the DOT proposal for the new interchange, with both Route A and Route B clearly marked. Route B cut a savage scar directly through my grandfather's favorite grazing pasture. "I have friends, you know," she began, her tone dripping with condescension. "Important friends on the county board, friends in the legislature. They keep me informed. And what they inform me of is that the state is about to make a very big decision. A decision that will affect both of us." She tapped the blueprint with a long, manicured finger. "Route A is a problem for me. It would require a redesign of our entire Phase 2 development. But Route B," she said, her smile widening, "solves all my problems. It would require the state to seize a large part of this derelict property of yours. Eminent domain, they call it, a powerful tool for progress." I remained silent, my face impassive, watching as she laid out her entire hand. "But I am a reasonable woman," she continued, her voice becoming a purr of mock generosity. "I believe in win-win solutions. I could use my considerable influence to persuade the state that Route A is, in fact, the more disruptive and environmentally damaging option. I could ensure they see the wisdom of choosing Route B. Or—" This was the moment, the final threat. "Me, if you were to become a more cooperative neighbor, my influence could be used to your benefit. Agree, in writing, to full compliance with all Oak Creek Estates HOA covenants. Paint the barn, tear down this hideous fence, and sell the back 40 acres of your land to our development group for a reasonable, pre-negotiated price. If you do that, I can make sure my friends in the capital understand that Route A is the best path forward for everyone. The state gets its highway, I get to complete my vision for this community, and you get to keep the rest of your little farm." She leaned in, her eyes glinting with the thrill of victory. "It's your choice, Riley. Cooperate, or be bulldozed by the wheels of progress. What's it going to be?" She had just attempted to extort and blackmail the single person in the entire state who held the ultimate authority over the very project she was using as a weapon. The sheer, magnificent, catastrophic irony of it was almost breathtaking. Mark started to step forward, his face a mask of disbelief and rage, but I held up a single, steady hand to stop him. A slow smile spread across my face. It was not a smile of warmth or amusement. It was the smile of a chess master who has just watched his opponent move their queen directly into a fatal, inescapable trap. "Thank you, Cynthia," I said, my voice quiet and even. "You've just made a very, very complex decision remarkably simple for me." The venue for the final act of this drama was a public town hall meeting, held, with a delicious sense of irony, in the main ballroom of the Oak Creek Estates Clubhouse. The topic was the contentious new highway interchange. The room was packed with concerned residents, local media, and a panel of officials from the State Department of Transportation. Cynthia Davenport was at the center of it all, seated at the main table, glowing with self-importance. She believed this was her coronation, the night she would publicly cement her power and secure her community's future. She delivered a passionate, commanding speech, lauding her own tireless efforts to protect the community's interests. She spoke of her vision for harmonious progress, and eloquently argued for Route A, the route that would spare her development by cutting through the adjacent, underutilized agricultural property. She even managed to sound sympathetic, framing the use of eminent domain on the Riley Ranch as a difficult but necessary sacrifice for the greater good. She was magnificent in her arrogance, completely confident that her backroom threats had secured my silence and compliance. When she finished, to a round of applause from her supporters, the lead DOT official, a man named Henderson, stepped to the microphone. "Thank you, Ms. Davenport," he said. "As you all know, the DOT has made its recommendation, but the final decision on a project of this magnitude rests with the governor. We are very fortunate that he has taken a deep, personal interest in this matter and, given its importance to the community, has decided to join us this evening to make his final announcement." A murmur of surprise went through the room. Cynthia's confident smile faltered for just a second, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. She clearly expected a simple letter of approval from a distant office, not a personal appearance. On cue, the large double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. The room fell into a stunned, absolute silence. In walked two uniformed state troopers, their faces stern and professional. They were followed by Mark, my security head, dressed in a sharp, dark suit, his ever-present earpiece now visible. And between them walked me. I was no longer Jack Riley, the dusty, grieving grandson in worn jeans. I was Governor John Riley, Jr., dressed in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, my face calm and set with the weight of my office. The sudden, blinding flash of a press camera cut through the dim light. And then another. I saw Cynthia's face. The color drained from it as if a plug had been pulled. Her jaw went slack, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrified comprehension. The smug, powerful HOA president vanished, replaced by a woman staring at a ghost. A woman who had just realized she had made a fatal, world-ending miscalculation. I walked slowly to the podium, the only sound in the room, the click of my shoes on the polished floor. I gave a warm, familiar smile to the crowd. Good evening, I began, my voice resonating with the practiced calm of 1,000 public addresses. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jack Riley, and I am your governor. I let the words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. I've recently taken some personal time to attend to my family's property next door, the Riley Ranch, which I have just inherited from my grandfather. It has given me a unique and very personal perspective on the issues facing this community. My eyes found Cynthia's. She looked like she was about to be physically ill. I am here tonight to announce my decision on the interchange, I said. But before I do, I must address a much more serious matter. It has come to my attention that certain individuals believe that the power of the state, the threat of eminent domain, can be used as a tool for personal extortion. I didn't need to look at her. The entire room was already staring at her, the collective weight of their attention pinning her to her chair. The president of your HOA, Ms. Cynthia Davenport, I continued, my voice becoming as cold and hard as granite, stood on my property and threatened me. She attempted to blackmail a private citizen, using the power of the state as her weapon. What she did not know is that she was not threatening Jack Riley, the rancher. She was attempting to illegally influence and extort the office of the governor of this state. A collective gasp went through the room. That is a felony, I stated, the words dropping like stones into the silence. As a result of this, I am not making a decision on the highway tonight. Instead, I am announcing that my office is launching a full, state-level investigation into the Oak Creek Estates Development Group, its leadership, and its dealings with the county board, on suspicion of corruption and influence peddling. All plans for the interchange are hereby suspended indefinitely, pending the results of that investigation. State and county law enforcement will be handling the matter from here. I looked at Cynthia one last time. Her face was a ruin, a landscape of pure, unadulterated terror. Her ambition, her power, her entire world, all of it had been built on a foundation of sand. And the man she had tried to bully had just opened the floodgates. The aftermath was a swift and brutal reckoning. The moment I finished my announcement at the town hall, Cynthia Davenport's world ceased to exist. The state investigation I launched was not a hollow threat. It was a surgical, top-down inquiry into her and her network's dealings. Investigators from the Attorney General's office descended on the County Planning Board and the Oak Creek Estates HOA offices. What they uncovered was a web of backroom deals, kickbacks, and casual corruption, all orchestrated by Cynthia to benefit her development and cement her power. My personal file on her harassment, meticulously documented, served as the investigation's starting point and established a clear pattern of malicious intent. Faced with a mountain of evidence and the full weight of a state prosecution, Cynthia was charged with attempted extortion of a public official, a serious felony. Several members of the county board were also indicted on corruption charges. Her important friends abandoned her instantly, scrambling to save themselves. She took a plea bargain to avoid a lengthy prison sentence. She pleaded guilty to a lesser felony, receiving 5 years of probation, a cripplingly large fine that wiped out her finances, and was ordered to perform 2,000 hours of community service. The conviction meant she could never again hold any public office or position of trust. Of course, she was immediately and unanimously removed as HOA president. The ensuing scandal forced the entire board to resign. The community, shamed and furious at how she had abused their trust, treated her like a leper. Within 6 months, a for sale sign was staked into her perfect, manicured lawn. She and her husband sold their McMansion at a loss and moved away in the dead of night. Their suburban dream, a smoldering ruin. With the corrupt elements purged, the Oak Creek Estates HOA was rebuilt from the ground up with new, reasonable leadership. They approached me with a formal, written apology, which I accepted. The new board officially and publicly acknowledged the Riley Ranch's sovereign and historic status, ending the absurd conflict once and for all. After the investigation concluded, I eventually approved a new, ethically planned route for the highway that served the public good without destroying my family's land. The ranch, once a battlefield, was finally the sanctuary I had sought. I spent my weekends there, away from the capital, finding a balance between my two lives. I was Governor John Riley Jr., leader of the state, but I was also just Jack, a grandson on his grandfather's porch, watching the sun set over the quiet, peaceful hills. Finally home.